I would like to shout out Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. Hello and welcome to the Broken Sword. Today we are having a look at Thorin Oakenshield before the events of The Hobbit.
Build me an army worthy of Mordor.
Thorin II, also known as Thorin Oakenshield. This dwarf was the son of Thrain II and grandson of Thror. This line generally held the title of King Under the Mountain, apart from Thrain as he was king while their people were in exile. Now today we are going to have a look at the life of Thorin before the events of the Hobbit story, and then briefly go over what happened during the quest of Erebor as well, as there are a few small changes that were altered for the movie version, so some of you may not know what actually happened to him. But now let's just jump into it. Thorin II was born in the year 2746 of the Third Age in the Lonely Mountain, which also went by the name of Erebor, and this was located in the northeast of Rhovanion and had been thought to be the home of the dwarves since the early parts of the Second Age. Perhaps hint to something that we could see in the Rings of Power show. But anyway, at the time of Thorin's birth, it was his grandfather, Thror, who was the king under the mountain, while also holding the title of King of Durin's Folk too. It was during the rule of Thror that the Arkenstone had been returned to Erebor, after Thorin I, who was the 6th great-grandfather of the Thorin that we know and are talking about today, had taken the Arkenstone into the far north to the Grey Mountains, where most of Durin's folk were now gathering. And this would have been in 2210 of the Third Age. But anyway, with the Arkenstone now back with Erebor, the kingdom prospered, with their wealth, relationships, and mining all growing at this time. However, this great growth was not something to be ignored by everyone. The rumours and stories of the wealth of Erebor spread far and wide, and so would even reach the ears of the dragons. These dragons were believed to be those that now infested the Grey Mountains to the north. There was one dragon who could not resist this temptation, and so, Smaug, the dragon who was considered old and strong by the likes of Gandalf the Wizard and the greatest of that time, took it upon himself to fly south and without any warning to those who lived there, attack Erebor with all his fire and might. Smaug would burn the nearby city of Dale and cause great damage to Erebor itself. However, Thror would manage to sneak out of a secret door along with his son Thrain. So, with this quick bit of background sorted, you may be wondering, well, where is Thorin then? In the movies it shows him escaping the city with everyone else, being a leader and helping those around him. Well, it did not actually happen quite like this in the stories. Thorin was lucky to have not been in the mountain when all this went down, but met up with his father afterwards, along with his two siblings, Frerin and Dys. At this point, Thorin was only 24 years old, which is considered very much a youngster for a dwarf, so was one of the youngest to go with the dwarves now in exile as they went south, eventually arriving in Dunland. They would stay in the hills of Dunland trying to make a new home for themselves. However, this was not the life that they longed for. They wanted to be back in their great halls and mines. So, 20 years after they abandoned Erebor, it became too much for Thror. He left his Ring of Power along with the map and key to the Lonely Mountain to his son, Thrain, and then set off with one companion named Nar. Not to attempt to reclaim the mountain though, as he considered himself too old for that job, but instead to set his own eyes upon the legendary city of his people, Khazad-dûm. This decision would have a great impact on the next years of Thorin's life, as when Thror reached Moria, it says, "When Thror came to Moria, the gate was open. Nar begged him to beware, but he took no heed of him, and walked proudly in as an heir that returns. But he did not come back. Nar stayed nearby for many days in hiding. One day he heard a loud shout and the blare of a horn, and a body was flung out on the steps. Fearing that it was Thror, he began to creep near, but there came a voice from within the gate. 'Come on, beardling, we can see you. There is no need to be afraid today. We need you as a messenger.' Then Nar came up, and found that it was indeed the body of Thror, but the head was severed and lay face downwards. As he knelt there, he heard orc laughter in the shadows, and the voice said, 'If beggars will not wait at the door, but sneak in to try thieving, that is what we do to them. If any of your people poke their foul beards in here again, they will fare the same. Go and tell them so. But if his family wish to know who is now king here, the name is written on his face. I wrote it. I killed him. I am the master." Then Nar turned the head and saw branded on the brow in dwarf runes that he could read it, the name, Azog. That name was branded in his heart and in the hearts of all the dwarves afterwards. Nar stooped to take the head, but the voice of Azog said, "Drop it. Be off. Here's your fee, Beggarbeard." A small bag struck him. It held a few coins of little worth. Weeping, Nar fled down the Silverload, but he looked back once and saw that the orcs had come from the gate and were hacking up the body and flinging the pieces to the black crows. Nar would return with that message to Thrain, Thorin and the others, and so the War of the Dwarves and Orcs would begin in 2790, albeit not with any attacks just yet. Thrain would send messengers north, east and west, as it would take 3 years before the dwarves possessed the strength to bring their act of revenge, finally having their host ready by 2793. I will not go into great detail about this war though, as Thorin's involvement is less well known, but if you would like a video focusing on all parts of the war that we do know, then please leave me a comment below of the War of the Dwarves and Orcs. But basically, there would have been many battles fought between the dwarves and the orcs, with the climax coming after 6 years of fighting in 2799 in the battle known as the Battle of Azanul Bizarre. This was fought below the east gate of Moria in the Dimril Dale, fittingly the same place that Thror had been murdered, which started the whole war off in the first place. During this final battle, Thorin would be wounded just like his father Thrain. However, his brother would be less fortunate, for Frerin would lose his life in the fight. The battle was so bloody that it is said, the memory of which the orcs still shudder and the dwarves weep. As for Thorin specifically, it says this on how he gained the name of Oakenshield from this battle. It is said that Thorin's shield was cloven, and he cast it away, and he hewed off his axe a branch of an oak and held it in his left hand to ward off the strokes of his foes, or to wield as a club. In this way he got his name. So, it was not said that from Azog he defended himself, just from many foes. In fact, there is no mention of Azog and Thorin even coming close to each other, for Azog did not appear until the Iron Hills dwarves turned the day upon their arrival. Only then would Azog show his face, kill Nain, who was the Lord of the Iron Hills, and then fall by the red axe of Dane Ironfoot, son of Nain, at the doors of the East Gate. There would be no Azog the Defiler in the future of Thorin here. In the aftermath of this battle, Dane would witness the sight of Durin's Bane inside the East Gate of Moria, and so no dwarf would dare step foot inside. It was also here that Thorin would swear to continue to arm himself with that shield of oak until he was hailed as king. From here, Thorin, along with his father Thrain and the other surviving Durin's folk, would return to Dunland after a discussion between the two. Thrain said to Thorin Oakenshield, "Some would think his head dearly bought, at least we have given our kingdom for it. Will you come with me back to the anvil, or will you beg your bread at proud doors?" "To the anvil," answered Thorin. "The hammer will at least keep the arms strong until they can wield sharper tools again." They returned to Dunland, and here the dwarves Balin and Glowin were also with them, and for a short time they continued to work for or with men, as it was not exactly unheard of that these two races would work closely together for economic gain. This would just be for a short time, for eventually their desire for their home would begin to rekindle. The dwarves would remove themselves from Dunland and begin to wander in Erebor, before eventually coming to make a new home in the east of the Ered Luin, beyond the Lune. Here their work with iron would prosper, but really it was just with iron. Other materials like that of gold were unavailable here, and Thror said that the ring of power he now possessed needed gold to breed gold. And also the numbers of this line would begin to slowly increase again too, but only slowly as they had very few dwarf women. The only one that we really know of is Dís, Thorin's sister. She would be the one who would become the mother of Fili and Kili, with them being born in the Ered Luin. And as for Thorin himself, we know that he would never take on a wife. But more years would pass, and eventually Thrain would give in to the desires of the ring of power he owned after becoming restless and discontented. He could endure no more, so set his sights back on Erebor. He would not share these desires with Thorin though, so when he departed he said nothing to his son, but left with a small company, which did include Balin and Dwalin. Thrain would disappear while the group camped on the edge of Mirkwood, being in 2845 at this point, and not one of his kin would ever see him again, as the rest of his group returned to Thorin after days of searching, but to no avail. Not that no one would see him again though, for while on his searches, the wizard Gandalf the Grey would come upon Thrain while looking for answers within Dol Guldur. Thrain would pass the map and key to the Lonely Mountain on to Gandalf, but Gandalf would not realise who this truly was before Thrain died from the effects of his torture. This chance meeting between Gandalf and Thrain would then happen to lead to another chance meeting, this time between Gandalf and Thorin. With Thrain presumed dead by his kin, Thorin was now the heir of Durin at 95 years old. He did his best over the next years, helping his people gain what wealth they could and growing in numbers with the help of the other wandering Durin's folk coming to stay with them. However, the Lonely Mountain would never be too far from the front of Thorin's mind. With each passing year, the desire for revenge against Smaug burnt brighter, but he had no hope when trying to devise a way to slay the dragon. That is, until that chance meeting with Gandalf would happen in 2941, with Thorin now being 195 years old. Thorin happened to be returning west from a journey and decided to stop at Bree, just at the same time that Gandalf also did, as Gandalf was on his way to the Shire, and at that time he was debating his options on what to do against Sauron. It was even as Gandalf sat and pondered this that Thorin stood before him and said, "Master Gandalf, I know you only by sight, but now I should be glad to speak with you, for you have often come into my thoughts of late, as if I were bidden to seek you. Indeed, I should have done so if I had known where to find you." Gandalf looked at him with wonder. "That is strange, Thorin Oakenshield," he said, "for I have thought of you also, and though I am on my way to the Shire, it was in my mind that is the way also to your halls." "Call them so, if you will," said Thorin. "They are only poor lodgings in exile, but you would be welcome there if you would come, for they say that you are wise and know more than any other of what goes on in the world, and I have much on my mind and would be glad of your counsel." "I will come," said Gandalf, "for I guess that we share one trouble at least. The dragon of Erebor is on my mind, and I do not think that he will be forgotten by the grandson of Thror." From this conversation, Thorin would invite Gandalf to his halls, where Gandalf went and they talked more about their plan. Their shared interest in Smaug was the defining point of this. Thorin wished to reclaim the mountain, and Gandalf was too wary of the effects of what a Smaug-Sauron alliance would bring to Middle-earth. And I will also note here, if we can get this video to pass 2,000 likes, I will get working on a What If Smaug and Sauron Formed an Alliance video for you all. But anyway, this is where the events of the Hobbit story and the quest of Erebor now take place. Gandalf would arrive at Bag End, the home of Bilbo Baggins in the Shire, with 13 dwarves. Fili, Kili, Balin, Dwalin, Dori, Nori, Ori, Owen, Glowin, Biffa, Bofa, Bomber, and of course Thorin himself. After a little persuasion, the company of 15 set off for Erebor, now including, obviously, Gandalf and Bilbo. They would meet the trolls where Thorin would find Orcrist, an elven blade known by the goblins as Biter, believed to have been crafted in the First Age within Gondolin. Then from here they would go on to Rivendell, where they were hosted by Elrond, and the Lord of Rivendell would reveal the secret moon letters on Thrall's map, which read, "Stand by the grey stone when the thrush knocks, and the setting sun with the last light of Durin's day will shine upon the keyhole," therefore revealing how they could enter the mountain in secret. They would then carry on and mistakenly end up in Goblin Town under the Misty Mountains, but manage to escape after Gandalf killed the Great Goblin. They then stay with Bjorn for a couple of days, before being captured by elves while travelling through Mirkwood after escaping from the spiders that dwelt there. Then from here they escape once again, this time of course from the elves, and then end up taking wide barrels down the river until they reach Lake Town. Here though, they do not have to escape from anything, as the Lakemen welcome Thorin warmly, hoping the return of the King under the Mountain meant a prosperous future for them. So they were given supplies for the final part of their quest. Off they set, and now, with the last light of Durin's Day revealing the keyhole, the way into the mountain was revealed. Bilbo the burglar Baggins was sent in first, and in the end, Smaug became wound up and took his anger out on the Lakemen, thinking that it was them who sent this hobbit. In the end, it was Bard the Bowman who slew Smaug with a black arrow. What did this mean for Thorin though? Well, it meant that the mountain was now empty, so he fortified himself inside. It did not take long for a host of Wood Elves of Mirkwood and a host of men from Laketown, being led by Thranduil and Bard, to come to the main gates. They wished for some of the treasure for their part in taking down the dragon. Thorin wished for no such sharing though, and even sent for his cousin, Dane Ironfoot of the Iron Hills, being the same Dane who killed Azog, to bring reinforcements. Dane would arrive with over 500 dwarves from the Iron Hills, so this is where Bilbo Baggins took matters into his own hands. Bilbo took the reclaimed Arkenstone and gave it to Bard and Thranduil so that they could bargain with Thorin. Thorin was furious at this, and so cast Bilbo out of their company. All this anger and tension did not quite reach a boiling point though, as at this time an army of goblins and wargs led by Bolg, the son of Azog, suddenly attacked them all. This was later named the Battle of Five Armies. Initially, Thorin and his company did not enter the battle, wishing to keep behind their fortified walls. However, as the battle continued, Thorin changed his mind. He leapt from the front gate and rallied dwarves, elves and men to him, changing the momentum of the battle. Sadly though, this is where Thorin would fall. He received a mortal wound during the fighting, while also his nephews, Fili and Kili, were killed here too. Bilbo would find Thorin on his deathbed, and Thorin would apologise to Bilbo. He realised the good intentions in Bilbo's heart and regretted his angry words and actions. He said to Bilbo something that I feel is very suitable to the world at this moment. If more of us valued food and cheer and song above hoarded gold, it would be a merrier world. And then, with that, Thorin Oakenshield passed away, with his body being laid to rest deep within the lonely mountain, with both the Arkenstone and Orcrist lying with him. So there we have it, a look at the life of Thorin Oakenshield. He was a stubborn, proud and greedy dwarf, but he came from a life of exile that toughened him along the way. Although he appeared differently in the movies, he was said to have had a white beard, sky blue hood and wore a golden chain around his neck where the key of Erebor would sit. He wore a belt of gold and jewels and wore stockings that were yellow. He spent his early years dreaming of reclaiming his kingdom, and in the end he was successful, albeit only for a very brief time after reclaiming the mountain. So as Gandalf would come to say, Thorin did not live to enjoy his triumph or treasure. Pride and greed overcame him in spite of my warning. Thorin Oakenshield was remembered as a great dwarf who sadly let his pride and greed overcome him. But nonetheless, the king of Durin's folk and king under the mountain did his people proud with everything he accomplished. Now before my question of the day, I would like to talk about our amazing sponsor, Squarespace. If you are looking to create a website, whatever your skill level, Squarespace makes everything not just simple, but very professional looking too. It is easy to include a fully integrated commenting system, along with the use of their powerful blogging tools to categorize, share, and schedule your posts. Do you wish to buy or sell something? Well, Squarespace's powerful e-commerce is easy to set up, with you also being able to add simple to use extensions. These tools can help you manage inventory, promote products, ship items all over the world, and much more. You need something? They have a way to do it. So go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/brokensword to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. So I do hope you all enjoyed this video for today, but now it is time for my question for you all, and that is, how do you feel Thorin's story compares to the one we got in the Hobbit trilogy? Do you think Peter Jackson did a good job with this character? Do you think he changed too much? Do you think he just didn't bring the true character of Thorin across enough? Or perhaps something else entirely? Please let me know all of your thoughts and opinions on this in the comment section below. And now firstly to quickly mention our other channels, which will all be linked in the description below if you would like to check them out, and also to shout out our patrons. Firstly, our Divine Power tier members of Kevin, Abram and Matt. You are all awesome, and a big thanks to our Fire Demon tier members of Nashith, Denversteel and Gregory. You are legends, and as well I cannot forget the Woods of Staff tier members of John, Andrew, Bill, Evil Chameleon and Jennifer as well. Every single one of you is a true legend of the Bro Hero. Finally, if you have managed to reach the very end of this video with me today and you have enjoyed what you've seen, then please hit that subscribe button and the bell icon too so that you can be notified of future uploads. And while you're there, why not drop a like on the video as well? So thank you once again if you have managed to reach the very end of this video with me today, and I will see you next time on The Broken Sword.